They were the knights of medieval Japan, an elite warrior class that held the reins of power for more than 700 years. Masters of the sword and bow, and driven by an unforgiving code of ethics, they proved ferocious in combat. They beat back foreign invaders and fought each other for land, status, honor, and power. Their legacy of martial artistry and self-discipline persists even today. They were the samurai. It's a typical training day at the Takeda School of Mounted Archery in Kamakura, Japan. Students on this practice course are keeping alive a warrior tradition that dates back over 1,300 years. It is called Yabusame, and it is a ceremonial and sacred form of mounted archery. Established in the 7th century as a way to pray for peace and prosperity across the land, Yabusame is still performed primarily at religious festivals and for visiting dignitaries. During each Yabusame event, archers, clothed in the hunting attire of medieval warriors, race their horses one at a time down the length of a narrow 200-yard course. Along the way, they shoot at a series of 3 targets, spaced at 70-yard intervals. Arrows that hit the mark are considered good luck charms. Shiro Iyataka Kaneko is the 35th master of the Takeda School.
It takes about 3 years to be able to perform Yabusame for the first time. But the most talented ones have been practicing for 10 to 15 years.
The key to successful Yabusame technique is the unique shape of the saddle stirrups that brace a rider's feet. They're really more like platforms than stirrups, but nothing less would do.
A rider keeps all of his weight on his feet, not on the saddle. This way, his legs absorb the up and down movement of the horse, and it keeps his aim stable.
Today, horseback archery is a highly specialized military art practiced by a select few. But it was once a common skill and the preferred method of fighting for an elite class of Japanese warrior known as samurai. The precise origins of the samurai are shrouded in mystery and speculation, and much of what we know of them has been handed down not as fact, but as legend and lore. What is certain, however, is that roughly 1,000 years ago, they emerged in a form much like the knights of medieval England. They were warriors who served regional lords and earned land and favor through valor in combat. Indeed, most of their battles involved the conquest of coveted land, one lord using his army of samurai to attack and seize the domain of another. Initially, samurai warriors fought as armor-clad mounted archers. Over time, their fighting methods evolved to include combat on foot, using swords of supreme quality, long wooden pole weapons called pikes and naginatas, and even matchlock muskets. Their attitudes were entwined with Buddhism and Japan's native Shinto religion. Eventually, they would also adopt a stringent code of behavior that would stress devout loyalty, stern self-discipline, and the zealous defense of personal honor. The code would also demand a particularly gruesome form of ritual suicide as a means to preserve one's honor in the face of defeat. The samurai class would come to dominate Japan, and over the course of their 700-year history, their values would shape the political and social framework of the country, leaving an indelible impact on the Japanese national identity. Japan is roughly the size of the state of California. Its total land mass consists of 4 main islands, surrounded by hundreds of smaller ones. Its first inhabitants are thought to have migrated from China and other parts of the Asian mainland between 30,000 and 12,000 BC. By 300 AD, some inhabitants had developed rice farming and established long-term settlements in the Yamato Plain, a fertile area in the southwestern portion of Honshu, Japan's main island. This permanent settlement soon gave birth to a political state based on military might and taxation paid in the form of rice.
Rice is a labor-intensive way of getting food out of the ground. And it's also a way of getting food out of the ground that makes you very committed to a place. If you're doing slash and burn agriculture, you can up and move. If you're building an elaborate irrigation system and then growing rice on it, you've put years of labor into a spot and you need to farm it for years to get the value of your labor back. And this makes it very easy to tax people. They're less inclined to up and run away.
Groups of extended families called clans began to struggle for dominance of the Yamato Plain. Small armies soon formed, supported largely by taxes collected from farmers. The history of this period is vague, but eventually one group, who took its name from the area in which it lived, made the right combination of strategic alliances to come out on top, the Yamato clan. They rose to dominance sometime in the 6th century. The Yamatos declared their successive leaders emperors and supported this move by also claiming divine origin. Their empire gradually widened as they conquered territories in neighboring regions of Honshu. Perhaps the most well-known figure from this family was a bigger-than-life warrior named Yamato Takeru no Mikoto, better known as Prince Yamato.
He was basically a mythical figure, a sort of Hercules sort of character that's invented as part of this growing political mythology. He's noted for a number of exploits. In the story, he sort of single-handedly travels about Japan, subduing various rebellious tribes and individual leaders.
Prince Yamato's fearless and daring behavior, mythical or not, became an archetype for future Japanese warriors.
In the middle of the 7th century, these so-called emperors had accumulated enough power, enough control over at least the central parts of the main Japanese island in order to impose a political reform.
In this reform, the imperial family set up a central government with a palace and a court of nobles, councillors, and government administrators at the site of present-day Kyoto. To provide the nobles with income, imperial lands were divided and distributed among them. Income came from taxes, usually in the form of rice, paid by peasant farmers who worked the lands. But it was the responsibility of the nobles themselves to protect their lands and collect taxes. This could be especially difficult if a nobleman's property lay hundreds of miles from Kyoto.
You have to form kind of a private army to make sure that the peasants are properly taxed and that you receive your income. Otherwise, there may be robbers on the way. You know, there are famines and there are robbers on the way that attack these convoys and they steal all the rice. That is your income.
Manpower for these private armies was often drawn from warrior families living on the edges of the empire. Most were of noble descent. As the noble families in Kyoto had grown in size, many of the younger sons had been forced to the empire's boundaries to conquer new lands for themselves. These men fought from horseback, using the bow and arrow as their primary weapon, and frontier life had made them tough as nails. They became a sort of rural police force for the nobles in Kyoto and were ultimately dubbed samurai, meaning one who serves. In exchange for their services, they demanded parcels of land. This was the true beginning of the samurai tradition.
As more they were in demand, these warriors, the more powerful they became. Why? Because they also had to be paid in land. There was no money, right? And so sometimes the official in Kyoto had to divide his land, from which he drew his income, into half.